Avi Meyer is editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. If you want to read it, go to jpost.com. Good morning, Avi from Israel. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me, Hugh.
First, my condolences to you and to everyone in your family, among your friends, and throughout the state of Israel. I'm stunned this morning. The death toll has gone up to 1,200. The wounded are at 4,000. The horror just keeps growing. And I've covered massacres and terrorism since I've been on the air in 1990. I've never had this kind of reaction because it was an army of monsters that marched into Israel. I had no idea of the depth of depravity in Gaza. Do you think, did Israel know how deep the evil was?
I mean, look, it's certainly not news to us that Hamas is a genocidal, murderous, terrorist organization that will stop at nothing to murder Jews. But what we saw on display on Saturday was unlike anything we'd ever witnessed before. This was an ISIS like organization on display, beheading babies, raping women, executing the elderly in the street, kidnapping entire families that are currently being held in the Gaza Strip. The carnage is unthinkable, and the fact that we've reached 1,200 people, and it may even climb further, is just an indication of how brutal, how barbaric this organization is in its quest to destroy as many Jewish lives as possible.
So, what is the resolve in Israel vis-a-vis Hamas? And by the way, I think of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran as all one monster with three heads. And I'm not sure that the president spoke clearly yesterday because he didn't name Iran or Hezbollah. He just named Hamas. What is the level of resolve to deal with at least Hamas and maybe the other two right now?
Well, look, the state of Israel is strong. We are a country in shock and a country in mourning, but we will rally and we will respond. At the moment, the task is twofold. First, to recover, restore those hostages, bring them home. Again, they include the elderly, men, women, and children, entire families, mothers, and their children. Bring them all home as safely and as quickly as possible, while at the same time dealing Hamas a blow it will never forget. There are calls in Israel to cause the Hamas leadership to collapse, to basically bring them down and restore the leadership of that territory to either the Palestinian Authority or another leadership that will arise. Up until now, the sense in Israel has been that the devil we know, meaning Hamas, is better than the devil we don't know, right? Because we don't know what might arise in Gaza after Hamas is brought down. That is no longer the consensus in Israel. There are many who feel that no matter what happens after, there's nothing that could possibly be worse than the barbarism that we saw on display on Saturday, and Hamas must be brought down.
No, I don't know how you get worse. As you said, ISIS has always sort of defined the bottom, and now Hamas has defined. We fell off the floor with Hamas and the decapitation of babies and the execution of elderly and the parading of hostages. It's just a genocidal group. Do you believe that war is imminent on the northern front? Because it's gone from a shell here and a shell there to a couple of missiles to more missiles. What do you think, Avi?
Well, there was an incident earlier today in which a rocket propelled launch, actually an anti-tank missile was launched at an Israeli vehicle on the Israeli side of the border. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for that incident. That has the potential for causing a dramatic escalation on the north. That would be a cataclysmic event. You have to understand that Hezbollah is not Hamas. They are essentially an army within Lebanon. They have 150,000, not rockets, but rather missiles, many of them guided missiles that could hit very sensitive infrastructure in the depth of Israel. Of course, it is an Iranian terror proxy. It's been funded by Iran all these years, as of course has Hamas as well. So that is something that many Israelis would like to avoid because Israel could indeed be in extremely deep peril if that were to happen. And there are many Israelis who are extremely grateful to the American people for having sent an aircraft carrier group to the Eastern Mediterranean to show strength, to show a sense of deterrence and prevent Iran and its proxy Hezbollah from getting involved in this conflict at this time.
Now, Dr. Oren is on this show weekly, and he put out yesterday thanking President Biden a tweet saying that was great. I am not a fan of President Biden not naming Hezbollah because I don't know if you can deter people if you don't name Iran and Hezbollah. So that's my critique. It's not yours. Let me ask you, Avi, I expected to wake up to news of a unity government. Why isn't that in place yet?
Well, many Israelis are asking the same question, as did we in our editorial just this morning. We are hopeful that a unity government will arise. It is long overdue. This is something that should have happened that day on Saturday. There's no reason it should be delayed up until now. It appears as though certain members of Prime Minister Netanyahu's current coalition are putting up all sorts of obstacles. That is unacceptable, completely irresponsible at this time. We know that the prime minister met with the head of the National Unity Party, Benny Gantz, this morning. There are reports that they agreed to enter into a unity government. We certainly hope that will happen sooner rather than later. Israel needs to be united at this moment. We cannot afford to be disunited.
Is it your understanding? I know Gantz has got to come in. He used to lead the IDF, and he was former vice premier. He's very, very serious man. I know he doesn't get along with Netanyahu, but they're going to put that aside. What about Lieberman and what about Lapid? Do you expect them both to enter into a war cabinet of the sort that Churchill put together in World War II?
I certainly hope they do. I think that is the right thing for them to do. It's the right thing for the country, especially after such a lengthy period of disunity in this country, which was essentially torn apart by the debate surrounding the government's judicial reform. This is a moment for unreserved, unqualified unity. And I certainly hope that all Zionist parties, all those who are part of the Zionist mainstream in Israel, will join that national unity government and will enable us to move forward in a sign of strength and unity.
I'm talking with Avi Myers, editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. Avi, I listened to a podcast, and Dan Senor will be on later with Brett Stevens, who held your job a long time ago. And Brett's back in America and is safe from the carnage. How do you run a news organization in a country in shock? 9/11 was a big blow, but we're a much bigger country with many more resources, and it was pretty far away from me in California, though I felt it. Israel, no one is very far away. I don't even know if you lost members of your family, but 1,200 people. How do you run a news organization in the middle of this?
Look, as you said, 9/11 was a traumatic event. I remember it. I was a high school senior at the time in the DC area. I remember the fog of confusion and chaos. That is very much what Israelis are feeling today, but orders of magnitude greater. As you said, Israel is not a large country. It's a very small country of under 10 million people. 1,200 dead is an unimaginable loss to this country. There's not a single family that hasn't been affected in some way. I know quite a few people whose families have lost members, children, grandchildren, cousins, siblings, and so on. We have had several members of our team either go on reserve or have several of their children go on reserve duty. So we are a diminished news reporting organization at the moment. I can also say that we've been under cyber attacks since Saturday morning. There have been concerted efforts to bring our website down. They've actually succeeded at various points. There are clearly those who don't want the truth from Israel to get out to the world. We, of course, will not let that deter us. We're active on all social media channels. No matter whether our website is up or down, we'll do whatever we can to get that information out there. We have at times had to go down to the bomb shelter in our building, which disrupted our activity only briefly. I put up a photo just the other day of myself editing the next day's paper from inside our bomb shelter. We're going to keep putting out a paper. We're going to keep getting the information out there. That is our duty to our readership and, quite frankly, our responsibility to Israel and to the world.
I knew you were under cyber attack because I've been trying to go to jpost.com, and I get through maybe 50% of the time. Ditto with Times of Israel, because obviously the evil people in Iran do not want the truth to come out. I think they may have miscalculated badly in what they thought they were doing, Avi. Do you agree with me about that? Do you think they had any idea how the world would recoil from this savagery?
Well, look, I think Israel at the moment is benefiting, I would say, in some ways from the world's sympathy. I think people have seen the savagery on display. They see the evil that Israel is confronting. The question will be, however, whether that sympathy will be maintained in the days and weeks ahead as Israel does what it must to deal Hamas a blow it will never forget. In the past, this is exactly what has happened. Israel gets some sympathy at the beginning after there's been a horrific wave of terror attacks or violence. But as Israel continues to do what it must to engage militarily against Hamas and other terrorist targets, there have been voices of opposition and those who've called on Israel to cease and desist. We're hopeful that that won't happen this time, that this will be a game-changing moment, that Israel will be given the diplomatic leeway it needs to do what it must. And quite frankly, even if Israel doesn't get that leeway, Israel will do what it must because that is its responsibility to its citizenry. That is its responsibility not only to its own citizens, but to the Jewish people, and quite frankly, to the Western world. We are at the forefront of a battle of civilizations. That's what Israel is. That's what Israel has always been. And if we don't fight back, no one will. We are at the front of this battle, and we will do whatever we can to ensure that Western values, Judeo Christian values, are maintained in this country and around the world.
Avi, I know that the vast majority of Americans agree with that and support that. Thank you for joining me. Please keep coming back every week and talking to us. And my congratulations on just staying up and getting the news out, because the West wants to know, and I just don't trust Western legacy media. They don't really understand what's going on. I didn't understand what was going on until actually confronted with it. Avi Meyer, editor of the Jerusalem Post. Thank you, Avi. I appreciate your time today.